All right, today we're skipping the hypotheticals and jumping straight into the deep end. We're going to look at real case studies. I'm talking about how actual clinicians, right now, are using AI to completely overhaul their documentation process. And believe me, they are saving a ton of time. So, let's dive in.
So I want to kick things off with a question, and it's a big one. It gets right to the heart of what's probably a huge headache for every single one of you out there. What if all that clinical paperwork, the most draining, time-sucking part of your job, what if it suddenly took 67% less time? Seriously, think about that. What would that actually mean for your day, for your energy, and most importantly, for your focus on your patients?
Well, guess what? That is not a hypothetical question. Take a look at this. This is a real result from a real 8-week orthopedic case, a total knee replacement. The old way, the traditional documentation time, 9 hours. Now, with an AI-assisted workflow, just 3 hours. That's it. That is a 67% reduction. We are literally talking about getting 6 full hours of your life back on just one patient's case. I mean, we all know this feeling, right? We call it the documentation drain. It's that constant nagging pressure, all that paperwork that just pulls you away from the reason you got into this field in the first place, to actually treat patients. It's got to be the single biggest thief of time and energy in healthcare today. And this, right here, is where AI comes into the picture. And this is really important, we have to think about it the right way. This is not about replacing you. Not at all. It's about augmenting you. Think of AI as your super efficient, super intelligent assistant. It's the one that handles all the tedious stuff, the structuring, the writing, so that you can be freed up to focus on what only you can do. The clinical reasoning, the patient care, the stuff where you are absolutely irreplaceable. Okay, so let's break down exactly how this works in practice. We're going to start with a pretty straightforward case. It's a 68-year-old patient, we'll call her Margaret, who's recovering from a total knee replacement. This is a real bread and butter orthopedic case, which makes it perfect for showing the core value of this AI workflow. So her journey was pretty standard stuff, over 16 visits. You got the initial evaluation to set the baseline, then the regular progress notes to track how she's doing, and finally, the discharge summary. It's the classic outpatient care timeline. And the key here is that AI was used to streamline every single one of those stages. And what's so powerful about this is how simple the interaction is. This is not complex coding or anything like that. The clinician just provides the raw info, patient history, her goals, the key details, and then gives the AI a really clear command. Hey, organize all this into a professional subjective section. That's it. And boom, here's the payoff. That initial evaluation, which is a task that, let's be honest, can traditionally take a good 45 minutes of painstaking writing and formatting, well, it was done in just 12 minutes. The AI spit out the draft, and the clinician just had to review and approve it. We're talking a 73% time savings on one of the heaviest documentation tasks you have to do. Just incredible. But it gets even more efficient when you get to the daily progress notes. So instead of stopping after every single patient to write a full, structured SOAP note, the whole subjective, objective assessment and plan thing, the clinician just jots down quick shorthand notes. Then, at the end of the day, they just feed all those little notes to the AI with one prompt. Create formal, Medicare-compliant versions of these. It's a genius little technique called batch processing. And this is where the savings really start to stack up. I mean, think about it. By spending maybe 4 minutes on each note, 2 minutes to jot down the data, 2 minutes to review what the AI did, the clinician saved 8 minutes on every single visit. Over the course of 14 progress notes, that adds up to 112 minutes. That's almost 2 full hours just given back, reclaimed from the paperwork void. Okay, so that's great for routine cases, right? A knee replacement is pretty standard. But what about the really complex stuff? The tough cases. Let's dig into how AI handles the much more demanding documentation you see with neuro, geriatric, and chronic pain patients. Right. For these more complicated cases, you need a different strategy. It's a technique called prompt chaining. So instead of trying to get the AI to write a huge, complex evaluation all in one shot, which can get messy, you break the task down into smaller pieces. You use one prompt to, say, create a problem list. Then you use a second prompt to build a treatment plan based on that list. It's a step-by-step approach that gives you way more control and better results for those really tough cases. Let's put this into practice with a scenario that I'm sure is pretty familiar and honestly pretty stressful: the plateau. So imagine you have a stroke patient, let's call him James, and his progress is starting to slow down. You know in your clinical gut that he still needs skilled therapy, but the measurable numbers, they aren't really budging. So the big question is, how do you justify that continued care to an insurance reviewer who's just looking at the data? Well, you do it with a really strategic prompt. Look at these instructions. The clinician isn't just telling the AI to report the flat numbers. No, they're telling it to frame the situation, to explain why this plateau is actually an expected part of stroke recovery, to highlight the skilled clinical adjustments being made to the therapy, and to document the advanced caregiver training that's happening. See? This is all about using the AI to clearly articulate your expert clinical reasoning. Okay, now let's switch gears to a geriatric patient in a skilled nursing facility. And here, the big challenge is compliance, specifically with Medicare's super detailed Section GG functional scoring. You know what I'm talking about. This table is a great example. The AI was prompted not just to document the patient's scores on admission, but also to project her scores at discharge. So you're basically building the discharge plan right into the initial eval. It takes this massive compliance headache and turns it into a simple, structured task. And then we have chronic pain. This might be the Mount Everest of documentation challenges. Why? Because insurers often see that word chronic and they immediately think not curable. And that makes getting approvals for continued care incredibly difficult. So the whole key here is to reframe the entire episode of care from the very beginning. And this prompt, this is a total masterclass in what we call preemptive justification. It's basically telling the AI to build a story that anticipates and shoots down the insurance company's objections before they can even make them. It's hitting all the keywords, emphasize that this is a new episode because of a change in the patient's status, highlight the new skilled interventions being used like pain neuroscience education, and focus everything on measurable functional goals, not just pain scores. So we've looked at a few different cases now, from the really simple to the incredibly complex. What's the big takeaway here? What are the lessons we can pull from this? Let's boil it all down into a clear set of strategies you can actually walk away with and use. It really comes down to 4 key themes that we saw in all these successful cases. Number 1, use prompt chaining to tackle those complex evaluations. Break them down. Number 2, use batch processing for your routine stuff like progress notes to save a ton of time. Number 3, always use preemptive justification to get ahead of insurance denials. And finally, and this is the most important one, your clinical expertise is what drives everything. The AI is just the tool. You are the strategist behind it all. And this chart, I think, really brings the whole point home. Let's circle back to that first total knee replacement case. Look at this. The time spent on actual patient care, it stayed exactly the same. The AI didn't touch that. It didn't take away from the patient. What it did was it took 6 hours of that administrative drain, that paperwork, and turned it into reclaimed time. That's time you can use for more patients, for developing new programs, or, let's be real, for just going home on time for once. And that really gets to the core philosophy that makes this whole thing work. It's simple. AI assists, but the clinician decides. The AI generates the draft, sure. It handles the formatting, the boilerplate language. But at the end of the day, your clinical judgment is and always will be the final authority, period. Which brings us right back to that question I asked at the beginning. That 67% reduction, it's not just a number on a chart, is it? For that clinician, it was 6 extra hours of their life back from just one case. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If you suddenly had an extra 6 hours every single week, what would you do with it?